is 1 o'clock and we want to respect everyone's time, our presenters, our participants. So thank you guys for joining the Greater Houston Chapter's Thursday, November 5th training, which is titled Designing COVID-19 Environments for Preschoolers. It's part of our series training titled COVID, Leadership and Self-Care. We're really happy that you're here today, and we've got a real treat for you today in this presentation. And we have 3 fantastic presenters that I'm confident at the end of this, you're going to walk away and not regret joining us. Just to go over a couple of housekeeping items before I turn it over to our presenters. My name's Aaron Carrera. I know a lot of you that are here with us today, and if I don't know you, welcome. I'm the president of the Greater Houston Chapter of Texas AEYC, and like a lot of folks that donate their time to AEYC work, I'm sort of a junkie and have been doing this for years and years, and really believe in the work that the chapters and the state affiliate does, and NAYC, which I serve on a board with NAYC, and I'm a past president of the Texas Association for the Education of Young Children. So this is part of just that whole scope of what we're all about. So is offering high quality professional development. I wanted to thank Discount School Supply for sponsoring this session today. In particular, they are sponsoring it with a door prize. So I don't have a picture of what they are giving away, but you're welcome to look it up. It is it's a stage that belongs in your classroom. It's called My Perfect Classroom Versus Space Stage. It's a cute little 4-inch high stage that's 3 feet by 3 feet. And the value on that is $265.24. So we will pick a random winner later on today, and we will notify you if you won. The housekeeping items, we sent this out in our email, but we ask that you please, on your Zoom name, please use the name that you registered under when you signed up for this training, because that really helps us coordinate certificates with who is actually in attendance. No, we don't just send you a certificate if you automatically registered. We're, very conscientious of providing those to only those that attend. Your microphones are muted, as you have probably figured out, and that's just to respect the presenters and everyone else, and so we can kind of dedicate our attention to them. Certificates, we will mail those to you through email early next week, and we do that just because many of you attended all of the trainings in the session, and it gives us time to process those, etc. The last 10 minutes of this training will be a question and answer session. So if you have questions that arise during the presentation, please send those through the chat function. Those questions will come to me, and then I will present them to our speakers in the last 10 minutes of our session. Thanks again for joining us today, and I'm going to turn it over to Zlata Stankovic-Ramirez, Sandra Duncan, and Lauren Mcgee. Thank you, guys.
Thank you all so much. We're so excited to be here. Our presentation is Designing COVID-19 Preschool Environments, the Butterfly Approach. Good afternoon. My name is Zlata Stankovic-Ramirez, and I'm a PhD candidate at Texas Women's University. I'm studying classroom environments. I worked as a preschool teacher, director, mentor, and higher ed instructor for about 20 years. And physical classroom environments are my passion topic. So I've teamed up with the best to bring this presentation to you today. My co-presenter is the incomparable Sandra Duncan. She has a doctorate of education, and she has 50 years of cumulative experience in our field. She has published numerous articles. She has 5 books published and 1 on the way. And she is an expert on this topic and someone who I admire personally and professionally. We're also really extremely lucky today to be joined by Lauren Mcgee. Lauren is an executive level registered architect and design consultant, as well as the director of architecture of environmental design and guidecraft. Lauren has also taught architectural design in higher education for many years, and she's a former elected public school board vice president. Lauren and Sandra frequently work together and design classrooms and schools for Kaplan Early Learning Company in US and Guidecraft internationally. In the presentation, the 3 of us have combined early childhood education theory, and we have definitely decided to take the practice of environmental design theory and practice and applied it to a unique concept for the design of spaces that support children's health, growth, and development during COVID-19 and of course beyond. Now, before we get officially started, we would like to thank Christy Barron, she's an architect from Emerson Design, for inspiring us to create the butterfly approach. And of course, Chris Burkholder, she's the CEO and president of Kids Country, as well as Kelsey Shackelford from Kids Country, because they have given us the support and many of the images you guys are going to see today. So let's go ahead and get started. So COVID-19 environmental design challenges. Well, designing an early childhood classroom is challenging due to issues like budget, space, and time. I'm currently working on my doctorate in child development and early education, and the focus of my qualitative research is actually classroom environments. And I'm discovering that these three items, budget, space, and time, are the most common barriers that teachers face in creating an optimal classroom environment. Now with COVID-19, these issues have even magnified. With budget, COVID-19 has caused many centers in Texas as well as the rest of US to lose significant amount of revenue because restrictions on ratios and amount of children who are allowed to be in space has really altered and changed. Also, average daily attendance has dropped because, quite understandably, parents are electing to keep their children at home. And this results in financial distress for centers. As far as time, COVID-19 has created additional responsibilities for everyone. I'm sure you all are experiencing this as we speak. For example, teachers are required to constantly disinfect and clean all surfaces in their environment. And these new responsibilities are usurping time previously allocated for lesson planning, program arrangement, management, and classroom design. While health and safety are always of paramount concern, the rebalancing of how classroom time is spent has become even more challenging. And of course, space, which is what we will be covering today. COVID-19 requires us to keep children 6 feet apart. Well, with as many children as we have and small classroom size that most of us have, we're finding the physical separation is nearly impossible. This hinders children's freedom of movement, expression, and the ability to easily navigate the classroom. So today we're going to focus on the design challenge of space. I'm sure you will all agree that most of us don't have enough space in our classroom. And with COVID-19, space is really the #1 issue that we are facing. So the purpose of this presentation is to offer a strategy for overcoming the barrier of not having enough classroom space due to COVID-19. And that's what we'll be focusing on today.
So, how do we get more space? How do we keep children separated? How do we find more space in an already small-sized classroom? This presentation will encourage you to reimagine your space and consider designing your classroom from a new perspective. This new perspective is what we call the butterfly approach. It gets its inspiration from the metamorphosis of a caterpillar into a butterfly. It will help you reclaim unused space in your classroom, find unexpected places for children to play, and give you design strategies for children to keep physical distancing during these troubled times of COVID. This approach, though, is not just for COVID. It could be a new way of thinking for you. It could help you find space that you didn't even realize existed in your classroom. So the butterfly approach might be a strategy for when COVID is ancient history, for when COVID is a thing of the past, for when we finally get back to the new normal. Let's get started by first helping you understand the idea of metamorphosis design and the connection between butterflies, chrysalis, and caterpillars. We all know that children are in a constant state of change. You just have to be in a classroom for a few seconds and you understand that. They are evolving in every way, emotionally, socially, physically, and cognitively. Children, in fact, transform from year to year, month to month, week to week, hour by hour, minute to minute, and even in the blink of an eye. As with children, the butterfly also evolves, going through the metamorphic stages from caterpillar to chrysalis to butterfly, and emerges with wings, just like children, ready to fly. If we believe that, like butterflies, children are ever changing, then it becomes important, very, very important, for us to design our environments to meet children's needs. Watch this short video of the dynamic metamorphic change of the butterfly emerging from its chrysalis. Yes, the metamorphosis of a caterpillar into a butterfly is beautiful and utterly amazing. Metamorphosis is all about change, which is what we need to do right now with our classrooms in time of COVID. We need to think about changing our classroom design. We need to think about changing our classroom design because we need more room. One way to do this is through the butterfly approach. Today, we're going to take you on a metamorphic journey of the monarch butterfly and see what lessons we can learn about classroom design from this amazing and stunningly beautiful creature, from the caterpillar to the chrysalis to the emerging butterfly. Let's begin this journey with the caterpillar.
If we look closely at the body of the caterpillar, we see that it is made up of segments. Its thorax and abdomen, the main parts of the body, have segments of different sizes, but each part of its body looks quite similar to the next when viewing it from the outside. We know that important things are happening in each of the segments of this living insect. The cuticle, or skin, of the caterpillar is a fixed size and does not grow. To change size and grow, the caterpillar molts and sheds a smaller skin for a larger one. So I'm sure you're wondering, what does this have to do with classroom design? And perhaps you're even thinking, it sure would be nice if my classroom could simply molt and transform into a bigger classroom. While we can't do the latter, I'm going to try to make an analogy between a typical preschool classroom and this chunky caterpillar and show you what we can do to find more space in your classroom without needing to molt. Let me introduce you to our typical preschool classroom, and it may look familiar to you. Perhaps your classroom looks similar to this, or you've seen a classroom like this. This is a bird's eye or overhead view of the classroom. So we're looking at it from above, looking down at the floor, as if we're, higher than the ceiling, basically. This classroom measures 700 square feet and is intended for 20 students, which assumes 35 square feet per child. This is an average allotment of space per child in a preschool setting, although you may be thinking the requirements in your center or according to your licensing agency differs from this. That happens, right? So we design for our own locale to meet our own criteria. But in this classroom, you'll see on the bottom of the image is the entry door to the classroom, flanked by cubbies on both sides. On the top of the image is the exit door to a play yard outside. On the left-hand side are windows, and on the right are bathrooms, plus a teacher's prep sink and cabinet. The white rectangles throughout the classroom are our shelving units. And in this classroom, those shelves define the learning centers in the classroom, along with the space that is reserved for the walkway. In this diagram, this is our same classroom, but now I've labeled the learning centers. These are typical centers, and again, may not exactly match the centers that you have in your classroom. So please bear that in mind. This is a generalized plan. You'll see if we move clockwise from the entry door and cubby area, we have learning centers dedicated to literacy, block play, music, science, dramatic play, art, math and manipulatives, and writing. So I want you to take a close look at how the shelving units in particular are being used to define each interest area. Notice that they're used as dividers and to separate interest areas from one another, effectively segmenting the classroom into discrete chunks of space. With this diagrammatic overlay, this is on top of our same classroom. Hopefully our comparison to the chunky caterpillar is becoming a bit more clear. Notice that our learning centers have been laid out in a linear way, lining the walls of the classroom perimeter, with open space left over at the center of the classroom. We call this strategy designing from the outside in. The space at the center is often underutilized because although we need it for walkways, it isn't programmed to be used as work or play space throughout the day in the same way our learning centers are. It's hard for activities from the learning centers, which are sort of like cells, to spill out into these walkway spaces because the learning centers are so contained by storage shelving. This is the main problem we need to solve, since our goal is to maximize how children use the available space of the classroom, and this leftover walkway space could really be better utilized. You can also see how each of our learning center segments compare to our chunky caterpillar's body, where each cell is actually quite similar to the next, with minimal variation in size. The cells are confining and limit children's movement, but also don't necessarily reflect the patterns of play and movement that children have. This is the second problem we need to tackle, since during COVID times and beyond, we need to increase the access to the available floor area to promote social distancing. And by facilitating the natural movement of children in the classroom, we can afford children more independence organically, which in turn affords teachers more time to spend on other things. Unlike the caterpillar, who can increase its size by molting into a larger caterpillar within a larger skin, or in our case, since we can't physically expand the floor area of our classrooms through costly construction, we need to implement a dramatic change in our classroom, a metamorphosis. We will do this using the classroom DNA we've got to work with, within the walls and in the footprint we have. We're going to transform our typical classroom layout in a really dynamic way. Using the same DNA, or in our case, the same furniture organized in a different way, we will achieve new results through a metamorphosis like this caterpillar metamorphosizing into a butterfly. Our goal in undergoing this metamorphosis is to turn our caterpillar classroom into a butterfly classroom. Before we look at our redesigned classroom, let's just first look at the butterfly briefly and see what we can learn from it. While there is clear beauty in the butterfly, I want you to look at it through an organizational or compositional lens. So we're going to do Architecture 101, composition. In contrast to our chunky caterpillar, who is very linear, regular, predictable, and segmented, the butterfly has wings with colorful patterns that radiate out from the center of its body, from its abdomen and thorax. The butterfly wings are organic shapes And the orange, white, and black spaces can be classified in terms of their relative proportion to one another. And that just means, right, their size relative to one another. Some are big and some are small. Their interconnectedness, so how they relate to one another, and their irregular yet symmetric patterning. It's actually really difficult to look at the individual segments of the butterfly's body because the real beauty of the butterfly's composition comes from the relationships between its parts and the whole. This is what we're striving to achieve in our redesigned classroom. So here's our new classroom. I'll give you a minute to look at it and orient yourselves. But keep in mind, this classroom's been designed based on those organizational and compositional strategies I just mentioned when we looked at the butterfly. So this is our bird's eye or overhead view of the classroom. Same classroom as before, 700 square feet, 20 children. On the bottom of the image is the entry door. The top is the exit to the play yard. Our windows and the bathrooms are in the same locations. The white rectangles are still shelving units. And all of the furniture is the same from our previous classroom example, plus the addition of a few rugs. Now we understand many centers aren't using rugs right now, and that's a smart decision because of the challenges of cleaning. But we've used them here just to help illustrate the concept. So now let's look at the learning centers in our redesigned classroom. Can you begin to see how the spaces I've named here are inspired by the butterfly? Our first major change is how we are using our storage shelving. Instead of arranging storage units to enclose learning centers, and instead of building centers off of the walls of the classroom, the storage shelves have been positioned in a radial array, like spokes on a wheel, around the center of the classroom. The intent is that the learning centers and the children in the classroom revolve and flow around each furniture grouping, rather than being contained and limited by the furniture. The shelves are not lining the walls of the classroom, but instead branch off of the classroom center like the butterfly's wings branch off of its abdomen and thorax. Instead of ending up with a loosely programmed center space, which had previously been just a walkway and not used for other things, now all of our learning centers tie back into this communal area, which is the hub of the classroom community. This is our concept illustrated with some diagrams. The 5 clusters of furniture identified with small turquoise dots tie into the center space. These are floating away from the walls, and we call these furniture islands. Between each of these islands are wing-shaped spaces that radiate outwards, identified in purple. This strategy of designing from the inside out, right, as compared with our previous strategy of designing from the outside in, designing from the inside out allows for a lot more flexibility in how much space is allocated to each learning center. The wing shapes easily expand into the corners of the classroom, creating different size zones for work and play, and maximize how our classroom square footage can be used. This is especially important now during COVID, and I believe, and we all believe, it will remain important moving forward in the future. This diagram demonstrates the flow and movement of children in the classroom around the storage shelving islands. This is represented by those dashed ovals. You've probably noticed that my redesigned classroom does not have a dedicated communal table for eating. Since eating times are mask-free, we have placed no more than 2 chairs at each table and have spread our tables throughout the classroom in order to maintain physical distancing. Using smaller tables allows us to have this flexibility during COVID times, but will also allow us to recombine the tables post-COVID for communal meals or other activities if we want to. Or we may choose to keep our tables distributed throughout the classroom with the idea that how we use the furniture and how it is arranged in the classroom can change throughout the school year as needed to meet children's needs. Another notable change, which is probably most obvious in the block center, is that I've used 2 smaller rugs here. These 2 rugs are used in place of a single large carpet, which is what we typically see in a block center. And I've also included a small construction table between the carpets, introducing another level or another space for children to work on. This concept of levels is something that Sandra will touch on later in the presentation. But if we just focus on this image here, by subdividing the big space of the block play area, I've been able to create more places for children to work within this learning center without confining children. Instead, I've opened it up. I'm using the design of the space to help achieve physical distancing, rather than requiring a teacher to constantly monitor this. Our other very popular center, Dramatic Play, uses a similar strategy to create more space. I've placed wipeable baskets and bins between the play kitchen units to spread this furniture out. I've also included a second table that encourages children to spread out even further, along with empty floor space for in-between moments. Those in-between spaces that are unprogrammed with furniture can play an important role in the classroom, which Lata will touch on later in our presentation. Through design moves like this, we are using design and organizational strategies to support children's natural play patterns and movement, rather than trying to control it. And in doing so, we've provided much more floor space and many more opportunities for children to spread out, so we can encourage physical distance naturally through design inspired by the butterfly.
Thank you, Lauren. So the three design strategies that we're going to talk about today are going to cover in-between spaces, and I will focus on that. Levels, which Sandra will talk about, and organization, which Lauren has already touched on and will further discuss with you this afternoon. So let's look at our in-between spaces. What are in-between spaces? Well, in-between spaces are spaces that have no purpose until we actually create a purpose for it. We tend to focus on the layout, our different centers, and rightfully so. However, once we have a layout that serves children's needs and centers that are ready for young learners, what are we actually doing with those in-between spaces? The spaces that are forgotten and underutilized. Well, let's look at some of those examples and options. Cardboard boxes are objects of interest of young children. Most children I've ever worked with and know in my professional and personal life, even the one I have, simply love cardboard boxes. Because of their different sizes and shapes, they can fit into any space in many ways of underutilized spaces in the classroom. You can set them up easily and fold them and put them away, or repurpose them in multiple ways when you are ready to do so. So I definitely want to encourage you to think about having something that is movable in your classroom. Here's another example, laundry baskets. Laundry baskets, you add a soft pillow, the child can look at a book and have some time to herself in a fluttering classroom. This is a great opportunity to have individual time and a clearly individual space when needed. And again, during COVID times, this is something that will help that child have its own space in the classroom. Now here's a small closet with the door taken off. This closet was way too small to hold anything meaningful in the classroom. And by taking off the door and creating this cozy nook for reading and puppet play, the children can get to have another interesting destination in the classroom and a space that otherwise would have been completely wasted and fully underutilized. Now here's what we like to call found spaces, some unused opportunities. Every nook and corner should be a destination for children to explore. In a room filled with cabinets, one clever teacher actually took off the doors and created this cozy nook for a child who needed a moment to pause, breathe, read, reflect, and of course gather themselves before joining the classroom and the rest of the children. And here in the next example, here's another unused opportunity. This is a clever idea for the back of a storage space. Add a skinny, tiny bookshelf and a chair with a small plant, and you have yet another reading space for children that otherwise would have been totally underutilized space. This is a bookshelf attached to the back of a storage cabinet and just creates a whole nother destination that wasn't there before. Here are some opportunities. Sometimes, unfortunately, we have furniture that is attached to the wall, something we need to have in the classroom for other purposes, but it just takes up so much of our space. Look at this idea here. This is a U-shaped desk with a mirror attached to the back of the desk, some pillows and a small rug, and then you just add a book basket, some pillows, and it's another great literacy area for young children to explore, and also another example of those in-between spaces.
Okay, number 2 strategy is called levels. Although we don't think much about it, there are many levels in the classroom where children can be actively engaged. Widely used levels in the early childhood classroom are the floors and the table. But there are actually 3 different levels in the classroom. There's the high, the middle, and the low. In times of COVID, we need to look beyond that ordinary level of the table and the ordinary level of the floor and look beyond and find some additional levels in the classroom. In order to offer plenty of places for children to be during COVID, an effective design strategy is to use a variety of levels for children's engagement. For example, in this image, the classroom teacher took off the legs of the table, the ordinary table, and transformed it into a construction platform. Pretty nifty. Now this child has 2 levels. The child has the level of the floor and also the level of the construction table. Who's to say that we just have to have an ordinary, regular, everyday table in the classroom? Why don't we have some special, unique tables, tables that you can find at a recycle shop or a garage sale, or maybe in your storage area at your home. Maybe you put something away that you don't use, but you could pull it out and bring it into the classroom. This unique table has something very special to it. Not only does it have a new level, but it has those drawers. And drawers are mysterious to young children. They love to look inside drawers. They love to put things inside drawers. It's rather mysterious. Children are attracted to its contents. So try unique tables that have drawers. Another level to consider is the level of on your shelf. Not only do you use your shelf for storage, but try thinking about using your shelf, for interaction. Rather than begin thinking about your shelves as just a level to put stuff, think about your shelves as a level to interact. Create places for children to build on those shelves. Create places for children to interact on those shelves. It's not just for storage anymore. Think of it as an additional place for children to be. And also consider shelving tops. Sometimes we don't use our shelf tops to its best advantage. Many times it just is a place for collecting stuff, papers and things like that. But why don't you think about your shelf top as a unique place for children to build? As in this example, the interesting objects on the top have been put out for children to explore and to manipulate, and the loose parts in the baskets serve as a supplement where stories can be acted out on the shelf's top. Another level that you can create is simply with tree cookies and tree stumps. Look at all the advantages and extra levels and spaces for children to create and for children to build their own stories in a special little tiny corner of your classroom. This teacher found added levels in stairs. She found the stairs in the storage area and it wasn't being used. It typically is being used for walking up to a changing table. That wasn't being used, so she brought it into the classroom and she created added levels. Look, there's 2 levels here where children can manipulate materials and build their own stories. Although teachers have a lot of stuff hanging from their ceiling, that stuff is rarely interactive. How can you use the ceiling for active interaction and for a new level? How do you do that? One idea is to use a projector, put it on the floor, make the spotlight shine up to the ceiling, provide translucent materials, tissue paper, beads, any kind of object that can project up into the ceiling. And all of a sudden, magic presto, you have moving stories on the ceiling. You are using the ceiling for a level of interaction. Very magical, very joyful. Children love to do this. In a blink of an eye, stories change and you are using a new level of your classroom. Construction platforms are also provide new levels for children to create and to build on. In this case, you just see a construction table that was made out of pieces of wood. But you can get real jazzy with your construction platforms like my friend Chris Burkholder from Kids Country in Ohio did. She went out and found what we call a tree cake. And it's actually a large tree cookie that she put some sealer on, and she attached 4 metal legs to the bottom of the tree cake, and she built a platform. That platform not only has the level where you see the dollhouse, but think about the level that's under the tree cookie or the tree cake. At Central Michigan University in their lab school, I discovered this construction platform, which is a brand new level and a way to construct. And it was right on the edge of the block corner, a perfect new level for children to participate in. Here's a very unique, lots of levels involved in this. This is a wine rack. And think about all the different levels of construction that children can use with this wine rack. They had great fun. And the best part about a wine rack is you can just put it off to the side and it can just be there ready to provide additional interactions with the children's materials in the block corner. I'd like to really concentrate on this level. This level is the walls. One of the most overlooked level is the classroom wall. Yet with COVID-19, when we're trying to find more space in our classroom, this idea about using the wall is a lifesaver. Instead of using floor space or table space or shelf space for learning, try using the classroom wall. It's called a vertical learning wall. Vertical learning walls are invaluable for a number of reasons. And I learned all about this when I wrote an article, and you can go see it at Community Playthings under their article resource. But a vertical learning wall does all sorts of things for children. For example, proprioception, left to right tracking, eye tracking, midline transitioning, and spatial development. So when we think about that, could you go back just one spot, please, Lalita? When you think about vertical learning walls, a vertical learning wall or a vertical learning environment is any vertical surface covered with 2- and 3-dimensional objects that afford children opportunities for perception, manipulation, interaction, construction of knowledge, and representation. So you see in this particular image, you see the 2-dimensional, you see the 3-dimensional. This is just nothing but a Christmas tree, shelving, kind of shelving unit decor that has been attached to the wall through double stick Velcro tape. And also the teacher added battery powered lights. So when the child comes up, he or she can turn on the lights for an additional fun experience on vertical learning walls. Here's an example of a vertical learning wall. This is proprioception, where the child puts the ball into the top of the tube and it comes out the bottom. This is simply PVC pipe that has been attached to the wall. Here's an example of a dollhouse that has been attached to the wall just a little bit above the floor level. And you can see that extra magical, mysterious drawer that children can put the extra materials in. But again, it has the battery powered lights that have been put in. The only caveat to battery powered lights is make sure that they get turned off at the end of the day, especially, so you don't have to have a lot of expense with batteries. Here's another example of a vertical learning wall, very cheap, very inexpensive, very easy to do. It's merely baking pans with puzzle parts that have double stick magnetic tape on the back of them. And the teacher has added an additional learning experience with the puppets and with a book. But it's a vertical learning wall where young children can experience proprioception, the left to right transitioning, the body movement, the mid-body transition. So there's lots of advantages in addition to using your wall space for needed space. There's lots of educational learning advantages of using vertical learning walls. Here's just the shelving units that you can buy at any home decor or home improvements store. They're just shelving units that can be attached to the wall, but you can make an instant library with putting these shelves on the wall. And the last one is a vertical learning wall with all sorts of objects that children can manipulate, can put together, can undo. And again, that's 2 and 3 dimensional. And that's what makes up vertical learning walls. They are marvelous for if you want extra space, if you want extra places for your children to go, especially during COVID, use your walls.
So our final strategy that we want to share today is to consider the classroom organization. I've already touched on this a little bit, and I want to go a little bit deeper into this topic. So to begin the process, we have to prioritize elements of our classroom and ask questions like which centers need the most floor space, which will have the most children, which centers should be adjacent to one another, and which need natural light. You're probably already asking many of these questions and many, many others. Asking these questions helps to create an organizational framework for our space. In our redesigned classroom that's inspired by the butterfly, our organizational strategy is radial, like spokes on a wheel. Unlike designing from the outside in, using that grid-like series of confining cells, we're starting from the center of the classroom and we'll design from the inside out, which I've noted here with these turquoise ovals and circles. In our redesign, we are opening up the classroom zones and learning centers to maximize the use of space, to promote physical distancing, and to increase children's natural movement throughout the classroom. All of our wing-like zones tie back into the center, our hub for our classroom community. We are using our furniture islands, those floating groupings of furniture, to develop the framework for this classroom organizational strategy. In an earlier slide, we discussed how children can easily circulate around our furniture islands. This is quite different than using furniture to contain. Instead, these configurations promote flow and support children's natural patterns of movement and play in the classroom. In this diagram, our furniture islands are identified again with turquoise dots, and I've mapped out how children circulate around these spaces with dark blue dashed lines. Our classroom zones are wing-shaped, and within those zones are our learning centers. Like the wings of a butterfly, each of our spaces is an organic shape that ties back into the center. Our white shelving is like the black veining on the butterfly's wing, creating different size zones for every learning center. By using this organizational framework, every space ties back to the center of the classroom, but with increased flexibility in how much space is devoted to each learning center. During COVID, we found that single large learning centers aren't always the best solution to achieve physical distancing. I talked about this a little bit in the block play area in a earlier slide. So in that learning center design and on this slide, I've turned again to the butterfly wing for inspiration. Notice the composition on the butterfly's wing. The wing is outlined in yellow in my diagram, and that matches our primary wing-like zone in the classroom. Within the butterfly's wing are clusters of orange, which I've circled in turquoise in both spots, turquoise on the wing and turquoise in the classroom. We've taken cues in this new classroom from the complementary organic orange shapes on the butterfly's wing, and I've subdivided our learning center using smaller mats and low furniture to create more opportunities for physical distancing and for children to spread out, like I discussed earlier. These smaller areas are circled in lavender in the classroom and on the butterfly's wing, and many of them are perfect opportunities for the different levels that Sandra discussed, such as construction tables, tree slices, or even vertical learning surfaces. And finally, we noticed that the edges of the butterfly's wings are lined with much smaller white spots. In our classroom, we have moments like this. These are ancillary spaces, or the in-between spaces that Zlata has presented. These are highlighted with white dots in my diagram. These are places that children can occupy alone or with a friend that provide yet another destination, but still remain associated with our learning centers. Using this organizational approach, we can layer in a wide range of sizes and types of spaces into our classroom. This ensures children have many different destinations to choose from, including group time, partner time, and alone time. This naturally encourages physical distancing as well, and can enhance children's opportunities for collaboration and independence during COVID times and beyond.
So today in our presentation, we discussed finding more space to meet the challenges of COVID. We talked about space and in between spaces, ideas and ways to use missed opportunities to create destinations that can easily be set up and removed as interest peaks or weans. We talked about levels, urging you to use a variety of levels in a classroom, more specifically the walls and shelves to create more space. And we gave you some strategies there and ideas on underutilized wall space. And we also talked about the layout and organization, the butterfly approach, the classroom layout that gives you a strategy and suggestion to address the issues of space during COVID. So we just want to conclude by saying that designing COVID-19 preschool environments requires creativity, flexibility, and willingness to try new strategies like the ones that we shared with you all this afternoon. In COVID, we are in the same storm, but we are not in the same boat. So it's also important to remember that every classroom is unique, every child is unique, and every one of you is unique. What may work for one classroom may not work for another. Just don't give up trying to meet the needs of the children and the community you have created in your classroom. Keep going, knowing that help is just an email, phone call, or in our case, Zoom call away in our new normal. And now, I would like to share this quote: "Until you spread your wings, you have no idea how high you can fly." We really hope that the butterfly approach to classroom layout and our discussion about levels and in-between spaces really got you thinking about your classroom and how to serve children best during this unprecedented time. We're going to go ahead and close our presentation with a video from the Houston Butterfly Museum, which is in your city. And during this video, we encourage you to reflect on the information we presented today and to challenge you to add to the comment section 1 or 2 ideas you've learned today that you're going to try to implement tomorrow, Friday, or maybe next week. And you can also share some long-term goals for your classroom organization. So please type your questions in the comments, and me and Sandra, myself, Sandra, and Lauren will gladly answer them. Thank you guys so much, and let's get started with this video. And that was our video, and you guys can go visit the Houston Butterfly Museum at your leisure. We just want to say grateful thanks to Christine Burkholder, Christy Barron, and Kelsey Shackelfold for their assistance. We've given you some resources here, Sandra, myself, and Lauren, if you want to learn more about classroom environments and all the strategies that are available for you for your use. And then here is our contact information. If you want to contact us directly, don't hesitate to email us. We've provided our websites and our phone numbers and emails should you need additional assistance. Thank you all so much. And we're going to turn it over to Aaron. Aaron, the floor is yours. Let us know what the burning questions are.
Okay, it's a lot of, well, thank you guys, Sandra, Lauren. It's a lot of, thank y'all so much for sharing this incredible information with our attendees. We have about 5 or 6 minutes left, and we have a couple of questions, and I'll go ahead and start on those for you guys. The first question was, this was asked relatively early on in the presentation, is how do you keep free-floating shelves from tipping over? And then the second part of that was, how do you manage this layout during nap time?
I'll answer the question about the shelves. And then Sandra or Zlata, maybe you want to take the nap time part. So the shelves are 2 separate shelf units that are placed back to back. That's a great question, because safety is the first thing we need to consider. So if you picture, you have a 24-inch high shelf unit or a 30-inch high shelf unit, that either has to get anchored to the floor, or if you push it up against another shelf unit back to back so that the shelves are open to the outside, then it prevents tipping.
Sandra, the nap question.
Well, as with any classroom, one of the things you can do is you can move the tables to the edge. Because all the shelving units are in the middle now with the butterfly approach, you have lots of room around the outside edge, and it may involve moving the tables a little bit, but I think with any classroom at nap time, most of the time, little tables and little pieces of furniture get moved to accommodate the cots.
Yeah, that's going to be my because my response to that is that during nap time when I taught, I always had to move something to accommodate for space, but this just sort of takes you from having to kind of put them in between the centers to having them maybe outside on the perimeter. So yeah, absolutely.
Okay, great. So another question was, do you guys have, are there any examples online? You shared one in your presentation, sort of a virtual tour. Are there any examples online of real classrooms that are implementing this that folks can take a look at? And if so, where?
Not that I know of. But if you would like to be the classroom that implements it, we would be happy to come and photograph your classroom. But maybe Sandra, all of these elements are inspired by things we've observed in actual classrooms, and taken away most successful moments in classrooms that do open up. And so through the software that I use, we have the opportunity to combine it all into one classroom.
And I think the other thing that I would like to say is that this is a new idea and maybe something that we should think about during COVID. Lauren and I have given several presentations. One that we gave on Bonnie's Global Cafe. You can go there at the World Forum, Bonnie's Global Cafe. We gave another presentation where you think about the classroom as a slice of orange, and where typically, what I really truly believe is we traditionally design our classrooms from the outside in. We put the storage units and the storage cabinets along the outside wall. That's typically where we begin designing our classrooms. That's from the outside in. What we're asking you to do is maybe think about designing the classroom from the inside out. And what would that do when you start thinking about inside out rather than outside in? Does it free up areas that that before has been taken by the shelving spaces? So the idea is relatively new. And it's something that Lauren and I have kicked around, and we haven't really seen any classroom that has actually implemented this idea, but we know because her software allows us to see how close the furniture is together, how far away it is, and we are able in 3D to see what the classroom would look like and how it would work. So we do welcome any ideas after it's done and any thoughts about the process. It is a new idea though, designing it from the inside out.
I would definitely encourage you guys to be the pioneers. Try it and send us photos and live with it for a few weeks and let us know how it's going, because this is something that we came up with together. So we would love a real life example. So if you are a daredevil and you're someone who is ready to try, please do so and let us know how the process went and how it's working in your classroom, and send us photos. Absolutely.
Lauren and I have done a number of presentations on designing classrooms, and the number one thing we want to try to do is try to figure out how to gain more space for children. And that's hard to do without knocking down some walls or adding an addition on. So what we urge you to do is to think about your classroom from a different perspective, from a new perspective. Think about, how can I gain some additional space through the layout of my classroom?
Okay, well, those were pretty much the questions we had. And so, yeah, if any of you on the Zoom here are interested in being the guinea pigs, certainly, if you don't have their contact information, email me and I will make sure that I get it to you, and we can get the ball rolling from there. But it's 2 o'clock. So again, out of respect for everyone's time, I'm going to go ahead and close this out. And thanks again to our presenters, Alata, Sandra, and Lauren. Thank you again for sharing your time, expertise, knowledge, and passion with us. And for our participants, thank you guys for taking an hour out of what typically is a very busy day. And we look forward to hearing more good things from you guys and seeing you at our next training or chapter event. So thanks again. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you, Aaron. Have a good day.
Hey, thanks, Lotta. Hey, you guys get your info to Michael, your address, mailing address and everything, okay?
I will do that. Thank you so much,
Okay.
guys.
Thank you.
Bye, Zara.
Bye.
Okay. Who's on cheese? Is that?
That's the one in here. Let me turn it off. It's the one on the side. Here. Got it. It's just you and I.
All right, dude, I'm gonna log off.
Yep. Log off. I'll let this thing start downloading. I'll go upstairs real quick.